Hello students, welcome back. We are going to discuss our next module. I hope you remember our last module is international investments. So this is the agenda for our discussion. International investment, we'll have an introduction. Then we are going to discuss about foreign direct investment. We will discuss about foreign portfolio investment, ADR, GDR, foreign institutional investments, ECBs, FCCBs, country risk analysis. It's a very small module and very interesting one. Many of it you already knew, so we are going to enter into that. Are you ready? Yes. So before we start with the entire discussion, what is your take on international investments? What really means or what will be coming under the category of international investments? Yes, I hope you are answering to my question. International investments are those investments that are made outside the domestic markets. We know that, right? And they offer portfolio diversification and also the opportunities for risk minimization. So the key positive factors about international investment is portfolio diversification, and the result is minimization of our risk exposure. An investor can make investments by broadening his portfolio and expanding to various horizons which give more returns. It also serve as a means of adding different financial instruments to the list when the domestic offerings are very much limited by variety. So in short, the nutshell is international investments provide an opportunity for diversifying our investments as well as obtaining financial resources from different sources, from a varied sources. And it is not confined to the domestic market. Investors in one part of the world may find a variety of combination of equity and debt instruments being traded in some other part of the world, maybe in a developed nation. So the basic idea behind this term is it helps to assure investors of two probabilities. That's the basic importance with which the world look at international investment. One, counter of domestic market risk. Suppose India is facing a financial crisis. India do not offer much return to the investments. There is not much investment opportunities in the market. What do we do? What will the investors do? They really have to get a return for their investment. So naturally, they will help to counter, international investments will help to counter the domestic market risk. And also, they provide an opportunity for foreign market investments. You can take your fund to anywhere in the world. It's not as free as we say, but international investments give us an opportunity to diversify our investments. Right? Are you there with me? So this is the background for us to discuss about international investments. Now I put a term here, official development assistance, ODA. This is very much related to international investments. Official development assistance can be defined as government aid designed to promote the economic development and welfare of developing countries. Actually, the The basic characteristics of a developing nation is they are in need of financial resource. They have plenty of opportunities, but need of financial resources. So this term is very much used in relation to the financial requirement of developing countries, official development assistance. Aid may be provided bilaterally from donor to recipient or channeled through a multilateral development agency such as World Bank or maybe IMF. Now, the OECD. What is OECD? Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. The OECD maintains a list of developing countries and territories, and aid to these countries will only be considered for ODA, that is Official Development Assistance. So there is a list looking into their need, their priority. OECD, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, has categorized, has given a priority list, and ODA assistance or official development assistance is provided to the countries depending on this priority list. And this list is periodically updated, and it has currently 150 countries. Currently 150 countries, India is one among them, fall into this list, which requires financial assistance from the various international economic institutions. International economic institutions was part of our discussion in the last module. I hope you have learned it, right? Okay, so we talked about international investments. We also talked about official development assistance. Now, when we talk about international investments, there are various ways with which international investments are made, or various routes through which international investments are made. Whatever we are going to discuss further will fall under this category, the different routes for international investments. You got the thread to our discussion? So we are going to discuss about the various channels or routes through which we can make international investments. Okay, let's start with the first one. I can see in front of me all my learners sitting, listening to me. Can you see me? How I'm discussing this? Are you able to reach to me? If so, it's great. If you have some doubts, some hitches in between, let me know that, so that the distance is minimized between us, even though it is through an online platform. Okay, okay. Right, we are going further. So we are talking about FDI. See, maybe the time when you started with learning your commerce, you might have heard about your foreign direct investments and other type of investments. FDI, the word is very familiar to you. Foreign direct investment, as you know, is an investment in the form of a controlling ownership in a business in one country by an entity based in another country. So the key here is it's controlling ownership by an entity based in another country. This is the key here, right? And of course, I have put a diagrammatic representation of the pros and cons of FDI. As we said, FDI, foreign direct investment, helps to diversify the investor's portfolio. It also promotes strong long-term lending. When you are trying to invest in another country, it's a type of lending to that nation. So it helps to obtain a long-term lending, because you are having a controlling ownership in one country. You will not switch your fund very easily. You are very much interested in the performance of that particular entity. That's why we say that is long-term lending. And of course, It is a way of providing financing to the developing countries. It also provides technology enhancement benefits, because you might be having idea, you might be having technology development ideas, but you may be in need of fund, or maybe you are aware that a particular technology is very popular in a nation, and you want to implement that in your entity. So FDI gives you an opportunity by inviting that partner to your company by giving a controlling ownership to develop the technology within your entity. So all these are possible through foreign direct investment. However, even though when we consider the merit, the demerits are very minimal, but it also have certain demerits which needs to be carefully handled by the regulators. Because certain industries, say for example, nuclear power, this type of investment is not strategically a right one, because that may have a negative impact, that may have some kind of security issues which is connected with the country's safety and security, right? So that is why it is said it is not suitable for certain type of industries. The most important one is armed forces, nuclear power. All these should be carefully handled and confidentially handled. That's why that is not encouraged under the category of FDI. Another one is when you are from another nation, you may not be knowing about the culture of the country where you're planning your investment. And the investors from uh, outside from a different country may, maybe they have, at times they may not have that moral attachment to the domestic, to the country where they are investing, because the vested interest is different. Your patriotism or your feeling towards the country may be different. So that's why the investors may not, chances are that they may not have moral attachment. And of course, it may also lead to unethical access to local markets, may lead to even though chances are very minimal, because we have a very stringent regulating body here in India, but still the unethical access to local market is also a possibility. So these are the cons or negatives that are associated with a foreign direct investment. However, foreign direct investment is a powerful route for attracting investment into a domestic country, into a domestic markets. And if you say some examples here is, you can see soft drink companies like Coke, Pepsi, then automobile companies like Ford, Hyundai. All these companies have adopted FDI route to be there in India, to make their presence in India. I hope you got a picture. Now we are going to discuss about the types of FDI. There are broadly 4 types. Even though no, there are many categories, we can broadly categorize them into 4 types. Let's start with the first one, horizontal FDI. Okay, as the name indicates, in case of horizontal FDI, a business expands to domestic operations to a foreign country. They're just expanding, they're just going in the same route. In this case, the business conducts the same activities, but it's in another land, it's in a foreign country. For example, McDonald's, McD opening a restaurant in India. It's a good example. They're doing the same business, but they are expanding that to another market, to a foreign land. Right? So that is a good example of horizontal FDI. Okay, now let's discuss about vertical FDI. Okay. In case of vertical FDI, a business expands into a foreign country. Listen to me carefully. Here also business expands into a foreign country by moving to a different level of supply chain. Okay. Here the firm conducts different activities abroad, but these activities are still related to the main business. Are you confused? I'm going to see an example for this just to make it clear. We take the example of McD itself. See, McD entering into market and purchasing a large scale farm in India. The idea here is they are purchasing the farm to produce meat for their restaurants. So they are entering into a different level of activity. They are purchasing a farm. But here, the intention is very much related to their core business. They want meat as their raw material. And they are purchasing this farm to have a better control on the supply and quality of the meat which they use for the business. So they are expanding into a different level of supply chain, but this expansion is very much related to their core business. That's vertical. Clear? I hope it is very clear. Now we're going to the third one. It is conglomerate. Conglomerate model. Here, a business acquires an unrelated business in a in a foreign country. They acquire an unrelated business. In fact, this is not very common. You know the reason for that? It's very risky. You don't know the foreign market and you're entering into a foreign market with a business which you're not very sure of. It's pretty difficult condition. So companies generally don't do that until otherwise it's a great opportunity with that domestic market. So maybe they enter with some barriers, or they have to overcome mainly two barriers. One is entering a foreign country and two is entering a new industry or a market. So generally conglomerate model is not so common because it's the foreign country enters the domestic market with a entirely different category or style or maybe different business. That's what we call as conglomerate. Now the last one, platform model. Here a business expands into a foreign country, but the output from the foreign country operations is exported to a third country, which means your market is not the foreign country. Your market is another country, the third country. You enter, you produce or you manufacture your product and then you start exporting that to a different market. This model commonly happens in low cost localities or locations inside free trade areas. I'm just quoting an example. If Ford company purchased a manufacturing plant in India with the primary purpose of exporting cars to another Asian country, imagine Malaysia. This can be brought under the category of platform model of or platform route of FDI. So here there are three countries in picture. One, foreign country. Two, foreign country entering the domestic country. Three, foreign country exporting the productions to another country, third country. So that's platform model. It is easy, right? Yes, I know it's very easy. Now we are going to the next part. There are different methods. We're talking about the routes. Now we are going to talk about the different methods of FDI. Okay, methods can be acquiring voting stock, voting shares. You purchase shares in a foreign company, or it can be mergers and acquisitions. You know what is a merger and acquisition? What is a merger and acquisition? Even though they are used interchangeably, both are different. Yes, Mergers and acquisition is a general term that is used to describe the consolidation of companies or assets through which various types of financial transactions, say including mergers, acquisitions, consolidations, purchase of assets, all these are dealt with. All these are being described under the broad title of mergers and acquisition. But there is a difference. When one company takes over another entity and establishes itself as a new owner, the purchase is called as, tell me, the purchase is called as an acquisition. I hope you said it right. An acquisition. From a legal point of view, the target company ceases to exist. The buyer absorbs the business and the buyer's stock continues to be traded while the target company's stock ceases to trade, or it stops to trade. It loses its identity in case of acquisition. Example, Tata Motors maybe acquires or acquisition of Jaguar Land Rover. It's a good example. Disney acquisition of 21st Century Fox. Right. Now, on the other hand, a merger. Merger describes two firms of approximately the same size who join forces to move forward as a single new entity rather than remain separately owned and operated. This action is known as merger of equals. More or less, they are maintaining, have an equal share in the market, same level of market cap, all that. Both company stocks are surrendered and a new company stock is issued in its place. So both the company lose their identity and a new company stock is issued in its place. Right? Now the next one which we are going to discuss is joint ventures. I'm not going so detailed into that because you have already learned about this in your graduation. So we just leave it like that. And going into the next is joint venture. This also, you know, JV is a cooperative enterprise entered into by two or more business entities for the purpose of a specific project or maybe a specific business activity. There is a core theme behind it. Each business keeps its individual legal status in this category, and they are often entered into for a single purpose. For example, like production of a particular commodity or maybe for a research project, right? So that is also a method of FDI. They come together, they do a project, they undertake a project, both will have vested interest in the project, and then maybe after the completion, the company which came in, the foreign company, may go back, may take their fund, may pull out their fund, right? So that is the joint venture. Then maybe coming up as a subsidiary, starting. Oh, I left a T here. I'm sorry. I'll put T. Okay, now it's correct. Starting a subsidiary. The starting a subsidiary of a domestic firm in a foreign country. That's also a route of FDI, a method through which you can come for FDI, foreign direct investment. Now we'll look at, we already mentioned about the benefits of international investments. We are just looking very closely into FDI. The primary benefit of FDI for businesses is diversification. When you find that your domestic country is not offering you much in terms of investment, you can diversify investment into more profitable ventures, maybe into a different country. That's diversification. Then some countries like Vietnam, they offer tax incentives. India also to some extent offer tax incentives. So that might be the attraction for foreign companies to bring their capital into a particular nation. So that is also one of the benefit of FDI. Then lower labor cost. India is one good example for that. where our human capital is much cheaper when we compare with the developed nation. And of course, there can be another attractions like subsidies and other benefits for attracting FDI into a particular country. And now we are looking into the benefits of FDI to the host country, to the domestic country, which attracts foreign capital. Primary one is economic stimulation through increased productive activities. Because many of your production might be stagnant because of lack of fund. FDI helps you to activate or stimulate these productive activities because you're charged with financial resources. So that's primary benefit of attracting FDI into a country. Second one is definitely when there are more industries coming up, more development coming up, more technology advancements coming up, the net output or the result of all these will be development of human capital. Employment opportunities will be more. Skill acquisition will be more. Why? People are trained enough. They might be trained for better productive actions. They might be trained for doing in better technology advanced industrial environment. So all these are that will lead to betterment of the skills, and that also will lead to better quality, enhancement of quality in the higher education institutions, because ultimately the skill, the human capital required for all these industries is supplied by higher education institutions. So looking into the requirement coming up from the industry, the training, the curriculum, the inputs which are being developed in the educational institutions also will be improved. So this is like a cycle. It's like a cycle. So these are the benefits to a host country. Okay. Now we are moving further to the next type of international investment, that is foreign portfolio investment. Foreign portfolio investment consists of securities and other financial assets held by investors in another country. It's not a controlling ownership. That's a main difference. It does not provide the investor with direct ownership of a company's assets. Okay. Mostly in India, NRIs invest in Indian stock markets through portfolio investment schemes, PIS schemes, which is governed by Reserve Bank of India. Currently, there is a cap of 24% on FPI investments in a company. Foreign portfolio investment, there is a cap of 24%. FPI holdings can include stocks, shares bundled into stocks, ADRs, GDRs, exchange traded funds, mutual funds, bonds. All these are part of FPI channels. I hope you will remember. That's why I put in same page in different boxes. All these are part of foreign portfolio investments. Okay. Now, talking about what is basically American Depository Receipt. I hope you know it because in class we had discussed this. ADR, key things which you have to remember is it is issued by US Depository Bank. For the investors in United States to invest in a foreign company's stock. It's as simple as that. ADR is a negotiable certificate issued by US Depository Bank representing a specific number of shares in a foreign company's stock. It's an opportunity for American investors to invest in a foreign company's shares. So for the foreign company, it is a source of fund. So suppose if it is Infosys, Infosys gets investment from American investors in the form of ADR. If suppose it has been bundled over there under the category of American Depository Receipts. ADRs represent a feasible way for investors from United States to purchase stock in companies abroad. Directly, they cannot come and purchase in our National Stock Exchange or maybe Bombay Stock Exchange. It's not possible for them. So ADR is a route for them to invest in a foreign company. Foreign firms, that's why they also benefit from ADRs as they make it easier to attract American investors and capital without listing themselves on US stock exchange. There is no need. They need not go and list in a US stock exchange, but they can have or they can make American investors invest in the company stocks through this instrument, negotiable instrument, American Depository Receipt or ADR. I hope the thing is very clear. You just have to remember this keyword, issued by US Depository Bank to the American investors for investing in a foreign company share. Simple. Okay. Now going with the next one, Global Depository Receipt. A Global Depository Receipt is very similar. It's very similar to ADR. It's a type of bank certificate that represents shares in a foreign company, such that a foreign bank of an international bank, foreign branch of an international bank holds the shares. Okay. Financial markets use GDRs to raise capital denominated in either dollars, US dollars, or euros. When euros are obtained instead of US dollars, GDRs are referred to as EDRs. So this is also a channel, but it can be for investors outside America. GDRs give international investors an opportunity to invest in, maybe you imagine there is a investor from maybe London. He would like to invest in some companies in US, some companies in India. GDR give him an opportunity to invest in Indian company stock, which may be denominated in US dollar or maybe euro. When it is denominated in GDR denominated in euros, it is referred to as EDRs. Okay, so financial markets use GDRs to raise capital denominated in either US dollars or euros. Okay, it is very much similar to, the only difference here is, here there is only one category of investors, American investors in picture. Here it represents different nations. This can be used by different nations, international branches. The investments are generally denominated in euros or American dollars. Okay, Global Depository Receipt. That's why the name itself is global. Globally, many nations can go with issue of GDRs. Now the next one which we are going to discuss is exchange traded funds. So the only difference here in case of exchange traded fund is it's a basket of securities that trade on an exchange just like a stock. It's just like a stock, and it's traded in the market. Exchange, it is traded in the stock market. But here you're not investing in a single stock, single share, but you are investing in a bundle of stock, which is basket of stock. So what is the benefit here in case of exchange traded fund? You're not putting the entire money in one single stock. You're putting that, or you're diversifying that to a bunch of securities, to a number of securities. So even if one or two go down in price, you can compensate your loss by the appreciation in the price of other securities. You're trying to manage your risk in a better way. That's the benefit of exchange traded fund. Mutual fund, you know that. In case of international mutual fund schemes, the only difference here is the funds invest in foreign market. That's the only difference which you can find when you consider. The concept is same, the idea is same. The only difference here is the funds are diversified, the investments are diversified into foreign markets also, into foreign. But of course, each government, each country's government will issue regulation with respect to what percentage the investment can go up to, and it is revised from time to time. You may not be able to invest the entire money into a foreign stock market, into the shares of a foreign stock market. It is not possible. The cap is issued by government from time to time, looking into the market conditions. So we have discussed about FPI routes, the different FPI routes. One is American Depository Receipt is a way which is mainly concentrating on American investors. The next one is Global Depository Receipt. The third one is what we discussed was Exchange Traded Fund. The next one is we also discussed about International Mutual Funds. I hope it is very, very clear. I'm not going very detailed into all these because you already knew, you have learned this. Now what we are going to discuss is external commercial borrowings and foreign currency convertible bond. Now when we look into external commercial borrowings, as the name indicates, it's a loan availed, when we look from Indian perspective, it is a loan availed by an Indian entity from a non-resident lender. That's why we say that is external commercial borrowing. Indian entity taking a loan from a non-resident lender. That's what we call as external commercial borrowing. Most of these loans are provided by foreign commercial banks and other financial institutions. When we look from an Indian perspective, it is a loan availed from non-resident lenders, normally with a maturity of 3 to 5 years. Generally that come under the category of 3 to 5 years. And when we look into ECBs provide opportunities to borrow large volume of funds at relatively lower rate of interest compared to domestic funds. Actually, that is our attraction in taking loan from a non-resident lender. When we find that the source of fund is very costly in our market, we'll look for other markets where we can find funds or we can resource fund at a cheaper rate. The contribution of ECBs is between 20 to 25% of the total flows into our country. Because of this, we take loan approximately 20 to 25% of total capital flows into the country. So ECBs are nothing but external commercial borrowings, or they are loans availed by Indian entity from a non-resident lender. It is generally for a period of 3 to 5 years, and the motivation here is acquiring the fund at a lower rate of interest compared to the domestic market. Right? Okay. Now we are going to talk about foreign currency convertible bond. Now we know what is a convertible bond, which has a right to be converted into share in future. So a foreign currency convertible bond is a convertible bond that is issued in a foreign currency. That's why we say that as foreign currency convertible bond. It is issued in a foreign currency, which means the principal repayment and periodic coupon payments will be made in foreign currency. Okay. Now, example, an Indian listed company that issues bond in US dollar. Okay. It issues bond in US dollar. These types of bonds are normally issued by multinational companies operating in a global space, and they are looking to raise capital in foreign currencies. Since they are operating across the globe, they have that opportunity to identify different nations providing cheaper funds. And FCCBs are generally issued by companies in the currency of those countries. Listen to me, in the currency of those countries where the interest rates are usually lower than home country. Where, first condition is where interest rate is lower, or foreign country is more stable than the home country economy. Foreign country economy appears to be more stable than the home country economy. So there are mainly two conditions for a company generally seeking for foreign currency convertible bond. One is if you find that the interest rate, the coupon rate is much lower in the foreign country, or when you find that the source of fund is from a nation whose economy is more stable than your domestic economy. These are the attractions for you when you go with a foreign currency convertible bond. So learners, are you there with me? We were discussing about different sources of international investments. We discussed about foreign direct investment. This can come as one single essay. Write about the sources of international investment. In that case, you have to write about FDI and different routes through which it comes, different methods. Then we will write about foreign portfolio investment, different ways of foreign portfolio investments where we discussed about ADR, American Depository Receipts. We discussed about GDR, Global Depository Receipts. Then, yeah, international mutual funds, exchange traded funds, right? Okay. And then we find in the next category, we discussed about external commercial borrowings, loans availed by an Indian entity from a non-resident lender for a period of maximum 5 years, generally for a period of 3 to 5 years. Then we also discussed about foreign currency convertible bond, which are issued in a foreign currency, and the payment of principal and the interest is denominated in the foreign currency. Are you there with me? Are you there? Yes, I hope you're there with me. Now, the last part of our discussion is on country risk analysis. Can you guess what is the relevance of this topic being discussed here in the context of international investments? Can you guess? If you were there with me, you will surely guess it right. Okay, let's check whether you guessed it right. See, when I'm trying to make an investment, of my hard-earned money, what is the primary thing which I will look for? I will look for whether my fund will be returned, whether I will get back my principal and a reasonable profit. Correct? That is the same purpose of doing a country risk analysis. When international investors are planning to load their money in a foreign market, they definitely will be looking for what is the level of their risk exposure in that particular country. Am I correct? Did you guess it rightly? I hope your answer is yes. So that is the context in which we are going to discuss the country risk analysis. When a foreign institutional investor is thinking about investing in India, definitely the institution or the investor will ensure that what is the probability of returning the principal with the desired profit. He will calculate that. Definitely he will do a calculation based on the present conditions and the past trend. When he is doing his analysis, he is going to look into three main factors or three main categories of risk. One, economic risk. Two, political risk. And three, sovereign risk. Economic risk, as we know, is nothing but It refers to the country's ability to pay back its debts. Suppose if the country is in a crisis, its repaying ability is very less. It's risky to invest in such a country. Suppose if the production in the country is going negative, again, there is a huge amount of economic risk associated with that country and that market. Right. So a country with stronger economy provide more reliable investments than a country with an unsound economy. That is the concept of economic risk. Now coming to political risk. Political instability is what we mean by political risk. Risk due to political decisions can also affect the investments in that country. In many cases, we have witnessed or we are witnessing, even if a country's economy is strong, but if the political climate in that country is unfriendly, it will not be wise to invest in that country because you will not be guaranteed with returning your principal and your profit. So that's why political risk is also one of the important factor deciding the flow of investments from foreign markets. The third one is sovereign risk. This refers to the probability of central bank favoring the foreign investment policy or maybe bringing rules that may adversely impact the value of investors holding. So it talks about the role of the country's central bank and financial institutions and other market participants supporting the growth of foreign investments in the country. It also includes the possibility of foreign government defaulting its sovereign debt. Now you might ask, what is the sovereign debt? Sovereign debt refers to the amount of money borrowed by a country's central government and is primarily achieved by selling government bonds and securities. So it is the assurity of money repayment by the government of a country. Suppose if the government is having a crisis, if the government is passing through a difficult stage, can any investor expect the repayment of money, the borrowed money on right time? Not possible. So that is why sovereign risk includes the possibility of foreign government defaulting on its sovereign debt. Suppose if your investments were into foreign bond, if your investments were into the bonds issued by the government of that country, bonds or securities or bills issued by the government of that particular country. That's very much relevant for you to analyze the country risk, especially the sovereign risk when you invest in such type of securities. So these are the main three types. In fact, this includes the entire risk. Then other than that, like natural calamity or maybe internal conflicts, all this, it is very difficult to predict. But these three risks, it can be estimated to a reasonable level through the present condition as well as analyzing the past trend of the country. So these three things are very much important when a foreign institutional investor or when a foreign investor enters into a market for making investments or for, we can also say as for lending money, right? Now last, how can we measure the country risk? There are broadly two methods for measuring country risk. One is quantitative analysis, data. You take up the economic data. You take up the past default ratio. These are data for analysis. So quantitative analysis risk measures the beta coefficients and risk denoting ratios like debt to GDP ratios, right? Because debt to GDP is your ability to, or it talks about your repaying ability. How much of your GDP is your debt? If your debt is almost equal to GDP, so repaying capacity is pretty difficult. We can anticipate that. So that is why the quantitative analysis measures looks into the risk coefficients or risk denoting ratios. See, when we talk about this, the Morgan Stanley Capital Investment Index, MSCI, Morgan Stanley Capital Investment Risk Index, is the most commonly used benchmark. It is one of the most commonly accepted benchmark across the globe for country risk analysis. That's one part. There is another part which talks about the qualitative analysis of the factors associated with country risk. It's actually a subjective aspect. It will not provide investors with a risk number. It will not quantify, but can give clear idea about the risk environment of a country. So it looks into the qualitative aspects like how the country is performing, what is the climate inside, the satisfaction level, the growth of industries. It looks into a general perspective or general environment within the country and try to predict how this country is going to be, whether it is favorable for the investments, whether it will it will be able to get good return for the investments made in this country. It's just a prediction based on the current scenario of looking into various factors. So measurement of country risk can be categorized into two. One is quantitative analysis and two is qualitative. Quantitative gives number to analyze the risk associated with the country, whereas qualitative is subjective. It takes into consideration maybe opinion of experts, economists, opinion of the experts about an economy. It's actually a qualitative analysis about the performance of an economy. All these factors will be considered when you're considering the investment in a particular country. So we were discussing about country risk analysis. As we said, when investments are being floated into a country, definitely the investors will look into the risk associated with the investments in that particular country. Okay, learners, are you there? Are you coming in my own pace? Is it too fast? You want me to repeat any topic? You can tell me that. I will do that. But listen to the video once, twice, and then read your study material. Then come back again to this video. I think you will have a better understanding. Okay. Now, after all these discussions, we are coming with our final assignments. Okay. This is the assignment connected with our module. You have to prepare a report. This is actually something where you have to look into both quantitative and qualitative aspects and then critically prepare a report for a pharmaceutical company, okay, which wants to enter into a market, into our market through FDI route. You really have to give them a report stating what is the risk exposure. It should contain both qualitative analysis and the quantitative analysis. The due date for submission is 15th, weightage is 15%, and word count is 2000 to 2500. As I always say, plagiarism, I insist your report is out of plagiarism. It should be less than 5%. If it is 0%, that is well and good. That's the ideal condition. Okay. The second assignment, which is associated with the previous module as well as this module, is you are going to have a report of Indian balance of payment BOP for the last 5 years, and look into the current account, capital account, and the official reserves. Looking into the movement, the changes in the current. It's very easy. It's direct. You just have to look into the numbers and just analyze the difference. That's all. Okay. You can prepare a percentage basis report. If you're good in numbers, you can also go with the ratio analysis. Okay, so that's what I expect, and it carries a weightage of 20%, which is from your word count can be 3. I have put it as 3,500. Again, there is one mistake. It is 2,500 to 3,500. Okay, so that's it, and there is one more which I already announced today through our WhatsApp platform. That is, we have an international seminar, which is the present crisis and how world economies are going to overcome that. It's an international webinar, and that is also part of our marking criteria. It carries a weightage of 10%. You have to attend and you have to prepare a report based on the discussions in our webinar. You have to attend it completely. Even though I make it mandatory, it is very useful for you. So you will not feel that you lost your time through attending this seminar. Eminent personalities from different nations are attending this as resource persons. So take the benefit of it. All my best wishes to my learners. I'm ready to support you at any point. If you need me, just text me. And if any part further you need a detailed analysis, just let me know that. Thank you very much. Have happy learning experience.